Ugg here with Two Salt Travel, and today I want to show you how to tie the Charlie Foxtrot or the CF Leech. This leech pattern is appropriately named because it's got a lot going on here in this fly. I borrowed elements from different leeches and tried to combine it into a neat little leech pattern that works great on stillwater. If you want to nymph this under a bobber, you can tie it on a jig head like this. It's got a little egg sucking part to it with that tungsten bead head in orange. And if you can fish it on the river, or you plan to give it a lot more action by stripping it, go ahead and tie it on a streamer hook. You can also substitute this out with just a brass or gold bead, or even a black one would work good. There's just a lot of combinations, color combinations you can put on this fly. A lot of times I'll tie this in all black, or in all purple, or all brown, or you can vary it up and do, black tail with a purple wing. And you can even change the color of this dubbing here if you want. So there's a lot of different ways to tie this leech, and it's just a fun little pattern. Hopefully you can go out there and catch a lot of fish on it. Next, let's take a look at how to spin one of these up. Alright, so you're going to want to start off by putting a hook in the vise. And this is a Tiemco 403 barbless jig hook. And to it, I'm going to add a orange slotted tungsten bead, 5/32. And then reseat that back in the vise. Alright, and you can cast on with your thread now, and this one is a iron gray uni thread 6/0. You can use a 3/0 here. I just didn't. I ran out of thread, so all I had in this gray color was the 6/0. So it'll work fine. But if you want to fill up some more space, quickly, tie on with some 3/0. And here I'm just going to cast on behind the bead, and then I can cut off my excess. And then I'm just going to build up a base layer on the hook, moving back in touching wraps to the bend of the hook, somewhere about there, just a little past the point of your hook. And next we're going to tie in our tail, and our tail is this brown rabbit strip. So I'm just going to check my end there and make sure I don't need to clean this end up a little bit. But if you do, what you can do is kind of peel back some of that rabbit fur and then cut that off really close. And that way you've got a nice little end to work with there. And this is a pretty sparse one. So actually I think I'm going to go over here and grab a little thicker one here. And again, I can kind of peel back that. And I just want to get rid of any, for the last fly I tied, if I cut it off there and it was kind of goofy, I just want to get that and clean that up. Okay, and then I can measure off here the tail. And I'm going to go a little longer than the hook length. I'm just going to kind of pull on those fibers a little bit at the end, and then just kind of measure that off. So roughly it's about that. It's not a very big tail. And then I can kind of peel back some of this fur there, expose the skin, and then get in there and then cut that off from the strip. Now I want to tie this in with the hide facing up. And so I'm just going to kind of wrap that over the top of the hook there and use my fingernail and my thumb to really pinch that against the shank of the hook, and then I can do a loose wrap, and then I can progressively get a little tighter as I crank that down. And then I just want that to be seated, you know, pretty evenly on the top of that hook there. And then next I will add some crystal flash, and my hank here is getting a little gnarly. I've been cutting a lot off of it recently, but so you can see, so red crystal flash. I'm just going to grab one piece off of there and go ahead and tie in and just put that right on the side. And actually I like it when it kind of bends down like that. Capture that, and then a couple of turns to make it tight. And then, you know, a little short of the tail, you know, something about like that. And again on the other side, tie that in, and then just kind of pulling downward at an angle just a little bit as I get that really cinched on, and then I can clip that off like so. Okay, next you're going to want to build up a body here about the thickness that you've got right there. So just kind of make that equal. And this is nice when you have that 3/0 thread. You can really build up some material quickly. I wish I had some for this video, but I don't, so we're gonna make do with what we have. And so I'll just go back and forth, you know, kind of close to touching wraps. Here that bead is kind of loose, so I might do a couple in close to the bead until it really seats itself well. And then I'm just going back and forth on the shank, up and down, building up that body. Until it's somewhat the same diameter all the way around. You know, so there I'm getting pretty close, but I'll just go one more time. Until I can, you know, come over the top right there and hide some of those, some of that hide there with the thread. Alright, so I'm pretty close right here. So next I want to, let me just clean that up right there. Okay, so next I'm going to add my marabou, and basically I want to divide this up into 4 sections, so into quarters. So there's a half, and so right there where my thread is, there's about a quarter. And so I'm going to put a clump of that marabou right here, and then another one here, and then another one right behind the bead there, just you know, about a half a bead length behind. Now this fly will ride hook up, so we're going to put that marabou on here, and it's going to help hide the point of that hook. So I'm using blood quills, strung marabou, and I can just pick a feather here off this clump. You know, grab one of these guys here, and you know, as you know, if you've watched some of my videos, you know, I like to prep the feather before I tie it on there. And so you can see these really plumy, really kind of gnarly looking feathers at the base of the tail. Those things have got to go, because we want a sparse wing for this leech pattern. And so I'm just going to get rid of some of those guys like so, and then I like to grab it by the tip here, kind of splay those fibers out away from the tip, and then I like to cut the tip off. like so. And then I just kind of go by feel, like, you know, I want a sparse wing. You know, that feels a little thick to me. So I'm just going to come back here to the base and take some more of those fibers off. Maybe just a little bit more right there. And then I'm just going to, you know, kind of run it through my fingers until it feels like it's the right thickness. I like to tie a little bit more of a sparse wing than I would a real thick one. And so then I just want to kind of measure that out. So it's going to go right about there. And I want it to be, you know, covering about, you know, most of that tail. And so I think I've got about the right length right there. And so the hard part about this is getting it in there without poking your finger. But I can lay it across so that the fibers are going on both sides of the hook point there. And then I can come around this other side with my fingers and kind of hold it. I'll do a loose turn right there and then cinch it down with a couple of tight ones. And then get that feather and get this stem out of the way now. We're cutting that off, and I want that pretty close because the body of this fly is a lot of thread, you know. I don't want, get these fibers out of the way here. And I want to cover that up with some thread right there, so I'm just gonna cover that up as best as I can. And next I want to go about halfway down this shank here, and I'm going to put my next clump. And I've prepped a few of these feathers already, so I'm ready to go. So I can just grab them now, kind of measure off about that same length again, and it's kind of right about there. And I'm just going to lay that in there on both sides of the point of the hook there, and then I can reach around and grab it again. And I do one loose just to kind of cinch it down, and then I can go a couple tight, pull the stem of that fiber up and put the thread on the opposite side of it. And that's just kind of helps me keep from cutting the thread when I go to get rid of this stem. Cut that off as close as I can, and then cover that area there with a little bit of tying thread, and then go to my next spot, which is about, you know, about there. And then I can grab another feather, which I've got prepped out again, and I just want to gauge my length on this thing. You know, I think it's about right there, and then lay that over the top. One loose, and lash it down, and then a couple of tight ones, and then pull that feather back, and then cut this off again close to the bead, you know, as close as I can, get it in there, and then a couple of turns just to finish that off and lash it off. Okay, so at this point now we're ready for the a little bit of dubbing, and we're going to do a dubbing loop, and we're using a Senyo laser dub in brown. And so I'm going to pull a little bit off of there, just something, a clump, something like that. Set this aside, and I'm going to make my dubbing loop. So I just pull off about 4 or 5 inches, and then go back over the shank, and then around that loop a couple times, and then back over the shank, and then here I can kind of pull it back, and then I can secure it down where I want that dubbing brush to start. And so I like to do this with my pinky finger, and then I do it vertically so that gravity kind of helps me out. And I'm just pulling a little bit of material off of there and just kind of shoving it in. And then I don't want it to be too thick, but I want to make a nice little head for this fly out of this great material, because it's nice. It's got a little bulk to it. It undulates, it moves a lot, and I really like working with it. And then it's got some purple color in it too, which is really nice, and I really like this color combination as well. Okay, so when I get a little bit on there, I like to take it here and pinch it, and I'll just rotate with my pinky finger a couple times, and that just kind of helps hold those fibers together. And then I'm going to grab my tool here for spinning, and it's got two little shepherd ends there, and so I just grab a hold of that. And now, if I don't want all that material spinning over the top of these marabou feathers, one thing you can do is take a piece of straw, just a straw you'd get from the grocery store, you know, like for your kids' drinks and stuff like that, and you can put that, cut it, and then you can put that on there. Move this up here. You kind of put that on there, and that'll help hold those fibers from getting spun into your dubbing brush. So now go ahead and spin that thing up. You don't have to get too crazy. If you spin this too much, it's going to break off the thread. But you can see I've got a nice what looks like a dubbing noodle kind of going right there. So right at that point I'm going to stop, and then I just want to brush these fibers out from the core there, you know, as kind of best as I can. You know, you don't want to pull all the fibers out of there so there's nothing left on the brush, but you don't want that dense mass down at the core. You want those fibers coming out perpendicular. So that's pretty good right there. I'm going to grab it with my hackle pliers. So I can grab it right here with my hackle pliers, and then I can cut this free from my spinning tool. And now I'm ready to wind this around the fly, and you're going to want to palmer it, which means, you know, you're going to want to kind of pull some of those fibers rearward as you wrap that forward. And it's kind of a pain with that hook point being right there like it is, but just do your best. That tool falls off almost every time I do one of those videos where I use a brush. And then when I get behind the hook there, or behind the bead rather, I don't really want to crowd that too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and tie that off right there. Because I hate those videos where I get too much material built up behind this bead here, and then when I go to do my whip finish, you know, I end up with this kind of bulky head right behind the bead there. So at this point we are ready to whip finish, and so I'm going to grab my whip finish tool here. I can kind of pull those fibers back a little bit and then do a whip finish behind that bead. You know, 6, 7, 8 turns, whatever floats your boat. And if you've watched some of my videos, you know I love to get those wraps nice and tight and compressed against each other. And then many times I'll do a second whip finish. As there's nothing worse than when a fly is working really good and all of a sudden you look down and you realize that things start to come apart. I feel like that if I tie in or whip finish a second time, a lot of times you know, I can still keep using that fly a lot longer. So yeah, cut your thread off right there, and then you just want to kind of brush this material back forward. You don't want to grab too many of these marabou feathers in doing so. So just take your time and kind of, you know, brush those out. I don't like it when it looks like the material is wound around the fly. I want it to stand more out. So yeah. So something like that. Really pull those fibers out. This side needs a little more. And then, now it's time for a little haircut. And you're gonna just wanna grab, you know, these fibers and pull them perpendicular to the fly and then cut them off. I'm gonna start by cutting off, you know, maybe a little bit more than a hook gap. You know, I'm just kind of working my way around the fly. And I just want to create a nice little head there. You know, nothing too crazy. Just getting rid of some of those real wild fibers, making sure that, you know, none of them are too long. And then lastly here, before we put a little super glue on it, is go ahead and I like to brush those upwards in the direction of the wing and back. So just kind of get in there as best you can around that hook and try and brush them up like so. And now you're ready for a little bit of, you can use super glue, or sometimes I'll use just this UV resin. This is the Deer Creek UV. And that works good too. So I'll put a little bit on my bodkin there, and then I'm just going to paint some of that on those thread wraps. Just trying to coat those thread wraps and then get some to go in between and get inside of those wraps. And then when you got it spread around pretty good, go ahead and just hit it with the light. Alright, and so there you have it. There's this is the CF Leech, or the Charlie Foxtrot. If you liked this video, please hit subscribe on my channel, and you can watch more videos on fly tying and instructional videos on fly fishing. Thanks.